Welcome everyone. The webinar will begin shortly. We invite you to connect with the campaign for grade level reading on social media. Please use hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. The webinar will begin shortly and will be recorded and shared with you afterwards. Okay, once again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I'll be behind the scenes helping to produce this conversation. I have just a few housekeeping details as we get started. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself in the chat box at the bottom of the screen. We also encourage you to post any questions you may have in the Q&A box, as we'll dedicate the last portion of the webinar to respond to your questions. This webinar is being recorded and live streamed on Facebook. A link to the recording, as well as any resources that you see shared as links in the chat, will be compiled and shared in a follow-up email to all webinar registrants. Finally, we'll be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during Q&A and highly encourage you to respond. And lastly, I would like to call your attention to our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars. Later this afternoon, we have a session on learning from the bright spots, examining student achievement data during COVID-19. Next week on October 4th, we'll invite you to start the month off with getting results with REACH. On October 11th, we'll have an exciting doubleheader, listed twice because extra exciting, but bringing Dolly Parton's Imagination Library to every county, followed by another session at 3 p.m. on engaging every student. Registration and information will be posted in the chat box now, and we hope you can join us. Joining you now is Jenny Atkinson, Senior Consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you so much, Sierra, and thanks to all of you for joining us today for our peer exchange learning conversation, First 10 School Community Partnerships in Action. These webinars allow us to lift up and learn about innovative approaches in early learning that are working to address common challenges that we face. Today, we are excited to hear about First 10, an initiative which supports the National Network of School Early Childhood Community Partnerships, designed and led by Dr. David Jacobson, Principal Technical Advisor at Education Development Center. Jacobson is the author of a 2019 report, All Children Learn and Thrive, Building First 10 Schools and Communities, which presents findings on coordinated efforts to improve teaching, learning, and care during the first decade of children's lives. Nationwide, he provides consultation and serves as an advisor on the First 10 model. And as a widely published author, he has advanced the knowledge of community school partnerships, bipartisan education priorities, building state P3 systems, and professional learning communities. After we hear more about the First 10 approach from Dr. Jacobson, he'll lead a discussion with state and local leaders who are making the work come alive in their communities. We'll hear from Dr. Andrea Berry, the superintendent for the school district of the city of York in Pennsylvania, Dr. Barbara Cooper, secretary of the Alabama Department of Early Childhood Education, Alyssa Gleason, the director at East Providence Health Equity Zone at the East Bay Community Action Program in Rhode Island, and Karen Rebello, the pre-kindergarten principal at East Providence Public Schools, also in Rhode Island. Please take a look at the bio document in the chat to learn more about our moderator and presenters. I'm really looking forward to this conversation today, and now I will turn things over to our moderator. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much, Jenny. It is really a pleasure to be here today. I feel like I go way back with the campaign. I have followed the campaign since its inception. I've participated in a number of local and regional grade level reading activities. And along the way, I've learned a great deal from campaign leaders and communities, and the campaign has been an inspiration for the work that we'll be talking about. As Jenny said, we have a stellar panel of leaders who are joining us to share their experience, their expertise, and their reflections on how First 10 school community partnerships can drive improved outcomes for young children and their families. As Jenny said, we have Dr. Andrea Berry, Secretary Barbara Cooper, Ms. Alyssa Gleason, and Ms. Karen Rebello. These are great leaders who are a pleasure to work with and who are really leading exciting and important efforts. I'll begin with an introduction to First 10. I'll talk about the rationale that underlies First 10. I'll share the framework that guides our work. I'll share concrete examples of First 10 strategies and in practice. And I think that you'll find that First 10 partnerships are very action-oriented. We exist to do. And I think what we've learned is that we're able to implement our strategies more effectively and have more reach within our communities through First 10 collaboration than we would if our member elementary schools and early childhood programs and health and social service agencies were acting alone. So with that, we'll turn to the visuals. And as context, I work for the Education Development Center. We are, so the next slide, Sierra. We are a mission-driven nonprofit organization focused on education, health, and expanding economic opportunity. And as we support First 10 projects around the country, we're able to draw on the expertise of many colleagues. So to start, I think it's helpful, next slide, please, Sierra. It's helpful to center First 10 around three big ideas. And the first idea is that research supports a community-wide approach to the first 10 years. And here we're talking about collaboration across early childhood and K-12, specifically with elementary schools, as well as collaboration across education, health, and social services. The second big idea is that First 10 communities around the country, innovative communities, both communities that we've studied through applied research, as well as the approximately 40 communities where we've implemented our transition to kindergarten and First 10 work, together really provide a roadmap that addresses teaching and learning, partnerships with families, and comprehensive services. As you all know, many initiatives focus more on the teaching and learning side, others on the families and comprehensive services side. Our reading of the research is that all three are important. And the third big idea is that First 10 provides a framework, a roadmap. Next slide, Sierra. First 10 provides a framework, a guided planning process, and a set of strategies, and effective collaborative strategies to draw on as communities do this work. I always like to ground this work, next slide, please. I always like to ground this work in the fundamental challenges of poverty. As grade level reading communities, you will understand the importance of investing in early childhood education, starting early. And you also understand that how we do this is very important. Next slide, please. As you all know, our early childhood mixed delivery systems typically in most communities are fragmented. We have gaps between 0 to 5 early childhood and K-12 education, gaps between education, health, and social services, and gaps between our public programs, Head Start, and our school districts, and our private community-based early childhood centers. And nationally, however, there are two movements working to address this fragmentation. Next slide, please. The first often goes by the name of P3, prenatal through third grade, or B3, birth to third grade. And the focus here is to both improve quality at each stage of development and alignment across the years, and particularly alignment between early childhood and early elementary school, bridging that gap between our 3 and 4-year-olds and our 5 and 6-year-olds. And so transition to kindergarten is an important component of this work. The second national movement in our next slide is really about using elementary schools, using schools and early childhood centers as hubs to connect families to health and social services. In K-12, we refer to these as community schools, or sometimes we use the term integrated student supports. And in early childhood, we refer to this as comprehensive services. Head Start has done this since its founding, and many of our early childhood programs do as well. So I have been providing technical assistance to states and communities around these two movements for many years, studying these two movements through applied research. And back in 2017, next slide, please. Back in 2017, I was funded by the Heising Simons Foundation to do a study of communities that were implementing both of these, implementing both of these movements, working on both of these movements. So working on the alignment across early childhood, elementary schools, and health and social services, and making those connections for families. And I talked to national leaders, including the campaign. I interviewed 18 communities, and I ended up focusing on these communities, most of which I visited and did extensive site visits at and wrote case studies on. And so then in 2019, as Jenny mentioned, next slide, please, I published a study called All Children Learn and Thrive, Building First 10 Schools and Communities. And this is where I first proposed the First 10 framework. And I had already really been sharing many of the ideas I was learning from the field with the communities I was working with at that time. So in a moment, I'll share that framework with you. But before we do that, I'll just quickly add, next slide, please. That First 10 is growing. We have now supported 13 communities in Maine, including a statewide First 10 team. 12 of those communities were rural and one was urban. In Pennsylvania, which Dr. Barry from York City is representing, we have 15 First 10 partnerships, both rural communities and urban communities, all clustered in South Central Pennsylvania. In Rhode Island, we began with transition to kindergarten efforts, and East Providence, our panelists from East Providence, participated in that work. And then we expanded to First 10. We're currently supporting 12 communities in Rhode Island. Those tend to be mainly urban communities. In Alabama, we've created a transition to kindergarten toolkit, and we began in one urban community and one rural, and we're expanding that group this fall. And then in Michigan, we've just last spring launched 6 new communities, a number of which are rural and urban as well. And then we're very excited that just this past February, we were awarded a grant from the Kellogg Foundation to create a network among the approximately 40 communities that are implementing the First 10 model. So we're very excited about that, and excited to have community to community exchange across our communities. Next slide, please. So here's the model in a nutshell. We begin with a commitment to education and racial equity and the whole child. We summarize this in the expression, all children learn and thrive. By all children, we aim to eliminate disparities by income, by race, by other cultural factors. And by learn and thrive, we have a whole child notion in mind that includes health and mental health outcomes, social emotional learning outcomes, and academic and cognitive outcomes. We then create a partnership. In all of our First 10 communities, we create a partnership, next slide please, that includes elementary schools and school districts, Head Start programs, early childhood centers, and families. And the idea of these partnerships is that we're all interdependent. Through our collaboration, we all get better at what we do. We then implement, and actually, so these partnerships, they take 2 forms. And next slide, please. The first structure then the most common structure, most of our First 10 partnerships are community-wide. They're really defined by the district boundaries. And so the defining feature of a First 10 community partnership is that it's multiple elementary schools and all of the early childhood programs and Head Start programs within that geographic area. And again, that's the most common First 10 structure. The other structure is anchored, next slide, please, is anchored around a single elementary school. And this is a First 10 community school hub. And here the idea is that the elementary school serves as a hub connecting to early childhood programs and Head Start programs in the neighborhood, in the catchment area of the school, and connecting directly with families with young children in the neighborhood, including families with children ages 0 to 4, so well before the children enter kindergarten, and connecting those families with health and social services. So that's the second structure that we see. Now, you may be wondering, well, couldn't you do both? Couldn't you have that a district-wide partnership, and then within that have a first 10 community school hub. I didn't actually find that in my research, but I'm happy to say that model, we are now seeing it in practice in our first 10 network. So if you'll advance to the next slide, please, Sierra. So you'll see the small hubs within the larger first 10 partnership here. And so this is a model that we're starting to see. And in fact, Dr. Berry representing York City, York is really the community in the country that has taken this combined model the furthest, with 2 last year and now a third first 10 community school within a broader citywide first 10 partnership. And we'll give you a sense as we go about what that looks like. And East Providence is interested in that combined model as well, our other local guests. And so they're taking some steps moving in that direction. I should add here that, again, it's not necessary to do both. And that is more ambitious. Some communities work up to that. Most of our communities start with either the district-wide model or the first 10 community school hub. So now, what do we do in these partnerships? Next slide, please. So we implement 3 broad strategies, and these strategies will be familiar to you all. These words will be familiar to you all. What I think is distinctive about First 10 is that we implement these strategies as part of a coherent plan across the full early childhood elementary school continuum, and really drawing on the best practices of our exemplar communities. Our first broad strategy is to collaborate to improve teaching and learning. This can involve communities of practice among family child care providers or home visitors or early childhood centers, but it always involves a comprehensive transition to kindergarten plan. Next slide, please. And that transition to kindergarten plan will include activities to support children and families in preparing for the transition and adjusting to a smooth transition, getting ready for kindergarten. It will include some great connections with our librarians under School Community Connections. Our children's librarians have been great first 10 partners. But perhaps most centrally, all of our transition to kindergarten efforts really prioritize program school connections, where we make substantive collaborative connections across our Head Start, early childhood, and district pre-K teachers and our kindergarten teachers. And we bring these teachers together for joint professional learning. I would say that joint professional learning across pre-K and K is really a signature first 10 effort. And that's often where we get a lot of excitement. I often say a little bit of magic happens when we bring these teachers together, and it makes so much sense to them that they should be collaborating. We can work on alignment, we can look at standards, we can work on aligning our curricula, making adjustments at the end of the pre-K year and the beginning of the K year so that things go smoothly. In this next picture, you will see that's Dr. Andrea Berry, the superintendent of York City Schools. This was at our first 2 summers, not this summer, but the prior summer. And Dr. Berry is opening up our first summer institute that brought together early childhood educators and kindergarten teachers around the topic of social emotional learning. We had prepared for that through workshops in the spring. We continued having after school workshops during the year. And in the next picture, you'll see this year's a table of teachers from this year's Summer Institute. Again, we took pains to make sure that we had Head Start, kindergarten, district pre-K, and community-based pre-Ks at each table, collaborating this past summer on early literacy, again, to be backed up by workshops throughout the year. In the next slide, you'll see the full group from this past summer's institute. And I think that through this work, we've really begun to create a different culture across the school district and the larger early childhood programs in the city of York. And our hope now is to as we move forward, is to draw in some of the smaller programs as well. Collaborating to improve teaching and learning and transition to kindergarten is a first broad strategy. Next slide, please. In the next strategy, we're really focused on coordinating comprehensive services. And here, not quite yet. And so as we coordinate comprehensive services, the idea is to improve our referral systems, deepen partnerships with health and social service agencies. First 10 community school hubs are a great way to do this. Family navigators are a great way to do this. And then most of our First 10 communities begin their work with by creating what we call school-connected play and learns. Next slide, please. And so here we're taking the tried and true play and learn group model, bringing together caregivers and children, doing developmentally appropriate activities. We sing, we dance, we read stories interactively, we do some cooking, we do some movement. And through that, we really build trusting relationships with families, help connect peers, families to each other. We always integrate some caregiver learning. And then we really try to emphasize not only connections across peers, but also connections to health and social service agencies, as well as to schools. So we'll have kindergarten teacher visit when possible. We actually do these at elementary schools. If not, regardless, we have our kindergarten teachers visit. We'll have the elementary school principal visit. Provide a warm welcome. We are so looking forward to seeing you in a few years. It's great. It's wonderful. These activities that you're doing. We'll read a story. And by the way, kindergarten registration starts in April. We've had a lot of good collaboration around school-connected play and learn groups. Our third strategy, next slide, please. Oh, sorry. So this photo shows actually during the pandemic, we had to do our play and learns virtually. And so you see the children showing off their artwork here. We're very happy that in all our First 10 partnerships, we've now moved back to face-to-face play and learns. Next slide, please. So our third strategy is to deepen partnerships with families in culturally responsive ways. This is about elevating family voice, creating avenues for family decision-making, developing a cadre of champions that can help connect us to families throughout the community, doing outreach to culturally specific groups, creating family navigators and liaisons and family resource centers. But we also start this work often with the parenting campaign. Where a community already has a parenting campaign in place, then our job as a First 10 partnership is to amplify that campaign. But where there's not a campaign yet in place, we tend to implement the basics. Next slide, please. The Basics is a parenting campaign developed by Ron Ferguson, a professor at the Kennedy School at Harvard, funded in part by the Black Philanthropy Fund. And the idea here is to saturate the community. Everybody who touches the lives of children and families really sings from the same hymnal in terms of these 5 core evidence-based parenting messages: maximize love, manage stress, talk, sing, and point, count, group, and compare, explore through movement and play, and read and discuss stories. For each of these parenting principles, there's a great 4-minute video in different languages, many different languages. There are tip sheets, there are posters, but and there's actually a texting service as well. And all of that is helpful. All of that is part of the saturation, but the most critical ingredient is hearing from trusted messengers. Next slide, please. And this is the Basics. This is why the Basics fits so well with First 10, because First 10, we really draw on all of our stakeholders in our partnership. We do outreach to our hospitals, we do outreach to our churches, and we're able through that to our employers, and through that, we're able to really help saturate the community with these 5 messages. And our families have responded very well to this. They find these messages affirming, validating. This is what they're already doing with their children, and now they can just be more deliberate, more intentional, and get new ideas for how to do it more frequently. Next slide, please. So here in this slide, this is Russellville, Alabama, in the northwest corner, a rural community where Alabama has a Born Ready campaign. statewide that we're amplifying through our First 10 partnership. Russellville had 100 families show up for this Born Ready event where they signed them up for the Born Ready texting service that Alabama is using. So they were really pleased with that. They families left with books. They did crafts together. They modeled the leaders of our First 10 partnership, modeled interactive reading, and it was a great way to start off their Born Ready campaign. In the next slide, you'll see outside of Birmingham, this is the Fairfield First 10 partnership. This is the planning committee for their Born Ready event. Second from the left, you see the superintendent who is showing her support for early childhood and 0 to 5 education and care. And the sign, you can't see it, but the sign under the balloons there says, a star is born ready. And that was the theme of Fairfield's Born Ready event. Next slide, please. So now we have a new partnership in town, and we are implementing these 3 strategies: collaborate to improve teaching and learning, coordinating comprehensive services, and deepening partnerships with families in culturally responsive ways. And it's important now that we lead this partnership strategically and continuously improve. So we begin this work by looking at work currently underway. Next slide, please. We say what is currently working, what could use a little tweaking, and what do we need to add to the work currently underway in your community. We then develop a plan drawing on First 10 practices. It's a focused plan. We then divide into small work groups to carry out the plan. Those groups meet every 3 weeks, and those plans have implementation benchmarks that we use to monitor our progress. And in larger communities, we then have a senior leadership team overseeing the work. In the next slide, you will see the First 10 partnership in Fairfield, Alabama. And in the next slide, you'll see the First 10 partnership in East Providence. If you look closely, you may see that I think I may have overdressed for this occasion, but in my defense, the purpose of this event, which was really the brainchild of our panelist, Karen Rebello, was to introduce First 10 and all the great work our partners are doing to members of the East Providence City Council and School Committee. And this is really the managing up part of strategic leadership. The event was held at the public library. Team members set up tables that the city leaders could then visit and learn more about the work that was underway. My understanding is that the mayor of East Providence knew not to miss one of Karen Rebello's meetings. Not all principals have that kind of sway with their mayor, but even though something kept him late at City Hall, he made it over. And what was great was that he came in right in time to hear me say that First 10 can provide a structure of collaboration around children and families for the city, and that the basics can provide a common language around parenting. So in the next slide, you'll see here's one of the tables that we set up and a couple of our First 10 leaders. You'll see a poster around the basics. You'll see a poster advertising our Play and Learns. In the back, there's actually photos of children playing in Play and Learns. And then in the next slide, you will see First 10 leaders talking to team members as they arrive at the library. And kind of in the center, you'll see a taller man, and that's a city councilor. You'll see, of course, he's wearing a t-shirt and jeans, but he was very involved in the Little League. And he had a great idea at the end of the evening about bringing in the basics and support for reading to the Little League and for all the kind of youth athletic programs. So that was one example of a great idea that came out of this event. And we were then invited to present to the school committee as well. Next slide, please. So this is the First 10 framework. We create a partnership focused on the goal of all children learning and thriving. We develop a focused plan and divide into work groups and carry out 3 broad strategies. Collaborating to improve teaching and learning, coordinating comprehensive services, and partnering with families. And then to sum up in our last slide, Research supports a community-wide approach to the first 10 years. Innovative communities across the country are together creating a first 10 roadmap that addresses teaching and learning, partnerships with families, and comprehensive services. And first 10 provides a framework, a guided planning process, and a set of effective collaborative strategies to draw on. So that's our introduction to First 10. Jenny has put a link to a short video and other resources in the chat. I know she's linked to the basics in the chat as well. And now we're going to bring this to life for you by turning to our panel of First 10 team leaders. And so for this first round of questions, we'll focus more on the why of this work, the underlying rationale that's motivating. And we'll start with Secretary Cooper and the state perspective, and then we'll drill down to our local examples. So Secretary Cooper, the agency you lead, the Department of Early Childhood Education, has developed strong relationships with the Alabama State Department of Education, the K-12 agency, as well as with the Department of Human Resources and other state agencies. And through these state level partnerships, you're also supporting local collaboration and system building. I had, for the audience sake, I had the opportunity to work with Secretary Cooper and 8 state agencies and the Alabama Partnership for Children, developing a transition to kindergarten toolkit. And the department is supporting First 10 and transition to kindergarten pilot projects in a number of communities. So Secretary Cooper, could you describe for you why cross-agency collaboration between early childhood and K-12 is important at both the state and local levels, and how that fits into your broader strategy?
Thank you for that introduction, David. And yes, cross-agency collaboration is absolutely critical in supporting our comprehensive services. This has been the key to a successful implementation for our state of the First 10 and the transition to kindergarten pilot initiatives. I can't stress enough that we cannot do this work without our partners. We've been trying to do it for far too long alone, but the partners have made it all come alive. All of these partners have been at the table as we did this work. And from the very beginning, we talked about our plans and what it would mean to actually have these First 10 communities, as well as a kindergarten transition toolkit, which was really the entryway for us as we moved into this work. We realized that we needed a comprehensive plan for kindergarten transition for our state. Again, we've been doing it individually, one community at a time, but really did not have a comprehensive collaborative initiative for our state. So we were able to build the system at the state level, and now we get to see the fruit of our labor at the local level as these statewide communities are being rolled out. And as our entire state this past summer rolled out the kindergarten transition toolkit. Again, those 11 partners that David talked about at the beginning were absolutely critical to getting this work up and off the ground. We've always had transition, but now this work is allowing us to go deeper. It's serving also as an impetus for us to build upon other work in our state, including our Governor Ivey Strong Start, Strong Finish initiative with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, which we know focuses on our B8 systems, our health and wellness, learning outside the classroom, family engagement, and focus on struggling readers. So this toolkit and this framework has really allowed us to now have a roadmap for the collaboration that's absolutely critical from birth through age 8, and it helps us to address some of those barriers to improvement.
Thank you so much, Secretary Cooper. It's great to hear about the connections you're making between the campaign and this other collaborative work in a very strategic and comprehensive way. And I will say, you know, what I've been impressed working in Alabama is through the rollout of some of this work, that the Department of Early Childhood Education is really working hand in hand with other agencies, including the State Department of Ed, and really bringing the whole network of coaches into the fold and becoming knowledgeable. These coaches are becoming knowledgeable about this work and really helping with the rollout. So that's been exciting to see. So again, thank you, Secretary Cooper. So now we'll turn to Dr. Andrea Berry from the York City School Department. Dr. Berry, you have extensive experience in the school system, working in various roles throughout your career, and now serving as the superintendent for the schools district of the city of York in Pennsylvania. Could you share with us more about your district and why you're collaborating with community partners on early childhood?
Yes. First of all, thank you all for inviting me to participate, and thank you for the introduction, David. So the school district of the city of York has roughly 6,800 students, and we are an acute poverty district, which means essentially that we are over 90% free and reduced meals in all of our schools. So we've not filled out lunch forms here in 20 years. We every child gets free breakfast, every child gets free lunch, and that has been for multiple years. So with that being said, our community, though it's small in size, there are huge pockets of children attending early childhood centers, and some of those students we get when they're 5 years old, and some of them we get for pre-K when they're 4 years old. So the premise for the partnership was, I knew that if we were gonna make systemic change and increase the rigor in our academic program at the early childhood level, we had to get kids before they were 4 years old. So where there were several tenets and several discussions before we even started working with First 10 Initiative. And that started with kind of, how can we get kids on board before they come to pre-K? And we started, I don't want to use the word small, but we started at this point where we said, you know what about the kids of the families that are already here? Those are kids we have relationships with, and we can leverage those relationships to try and get a hold of the younger sibling. And each generation gets better, right? We did our best with this student, but we want to make sure that we're making the situation even better for the next student. And we were fairly successful with that, but needing more meat and potatoes to the process, we joined the First 10 Initiative, and we saw right away the importance of the initiative and how this idea of community-based schools was the magic bullet, the carrot to get us to the point in which we can say, okay, we have a handle on students. And it kind of evolved. It started with one school. I believe that one school was Ferguson K-8. And then after our Ferguson K-8 school, which we were building as a community school with resources within the school, social services resources, making sure that the kids had access to food boxes, making sure that the parents were building relationships, making sure that we were inviting in the child care centers to come in and participate in some of our homeschool connection activities. And then we added a second school because we see the importance and the value from the first school. So we added Hannah-Penn K-8. All of our schools are K-8 buildings. So I'm sorry, pre-K-8 buildings. So when we added that second school, that school is actually already a hub naturally. It's surrounded by it's right by the library. It's right by, several of the different organizations that we were willing to work with. It had a healthcare clinic in it already. So we were able to capitalize off that model and get students and parents the services that they needed before pre-K. So we started building these relationships. And then we started talking about, can we get them even earlier? Why does it have to be 3? Why does it have to be 2? Why can't it be Bearcats from birth? Why can't we get them when they're born? Why can't we go to the hospital as school district representatives when folks in the community have babies and give them a Bearcat treat that says, hey, welcome to the Bearcat community. We can't wait for you to be a part of our school community. So we keep trying to grow this. So we've added a third school this year. My goal is to have all 9 of my schools as a part of the First 10 initiative, because I see the value in that foundation and building those relationships. Because of the First 10 initiative, our relationships with our community daycares have improved. We have transition forms from those childcare centers that come to our pre-K teachers. We have in-services that we're inviting our First 10 partners, our Community Progress Council, Head Start classrooms. We're inviting the teachers. We're inviting the childcare teachers to come and participate in professional development with our pre-K and kindergarten teachers. And we're seeing the value in that. And that's all because of the initiative. That's all because of us working together. So I can't say enough of how it's changed the dynamic of the community. And I believe, folks' outlook on schools in the district.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Berry. I love the emphasis on systemic change. I love the emphasis on developing relationships. I'm sure you all heard Dr. Berry's emphasis on relationship building throughout the community and with families. And this idea of reaching children and collaborating on behalf of children and families as early as possible. And as you can imagine, it's very powerful to have a superintendent leading the charge with the motto Bearcats from birth. So thank you, Dr. Berry. I'll now turn to Karen Rebello from the East Providence Public Schools. Karen, if you'll turn on your camera, I'd like to start our discussion of First 10 in East Providence by highlighting 2 distinctive features of the work there. One is your outreach and connection to political leaders and other organizations throughout the city as you promote the idea of One East Providence. And in the slides, I showed an example of that. So, and the second is the close partnership the district has developed with the organization that Alyssa represents, the East Bay Community Action Program, or EBCAP, which is a large social service provider in the area. So Karen, could you tell us a little bit about East Providence and how First 10 and the partnership with EBCAP supports your vision of One East Providence?
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me as well with this great panel of individuals. Our outreach and connection to political leaders is a result of open and ongoing communication. This is a shared interest in supporting schools and families in East Providence. Our community has had a long-standing commitment to supporting its constituents by providing housing, assistance to families, individuals, and children in the areas of food and utility assistance. Also, we have a lot of availability for a lot of other services through agencies like EBCAP, and we have some really great schools. As a city, we recognize the school is a hub to all families, and as all children will be in them at some point in their lives. As a school principal who came up through the ranks, I have experienced so many families who are in so much need of many of these services. Teachers and social workers would guide families through the varying agencies and supports, but often found that they did not seek out the support or found it difficult to access. Follow-up was a challenge on the school side, on the school side, it was hard for us because we have limited support to make sure that those families were able to get that guidance they needed. So the concept of community schools stood solid in our minds, and as a way to bridge the gap of city and school services, using the school as the hub. Families are most active in schools and build relationships with staff, and this allows them the comfort measures to seek the assistance when needed and provide the follow-through school personnel want for their families. EBCAP is a valued partner, and our work together has provided us the tools to assist these families beyond our school walls. The partnership between EBCAP and our first community school is a great example We started the collaboration with the goal of having a family navigator in all schools. And we started one in one site. Within a semester, the EBCAP had expanded it throughout the school by adding a community garden, and brought in the concept of aero gardening to classrooms throughout the school. So it went from just a family navigator to other programs and things that could be utilized for families. And the partnership at its core brings people with shared vision and goals together. The schools have relationships and connections with children and families, and EBCAP resources to meet the varied needs of our families. Ultimately, the connection allows us to collectively be better in serving our communities. So East Providence's goal is to make each school a community school. This year we added a second and are working to provide families with the same resources as our Hennessy school. And we work with the community to establish the specific needs of each of the neighborhood schools and build programs around those. So it has been an amazing journey to now, and we look forward to it continuing in other areas.
Thank you so much, Karen. Karen's remarks really set the stage now as we turn to Alyssa Gleason and the perspective from the partner agency, EBCAP, again, a large social service agency. So Alyssa, building on Karen's comments, I'm wondering if you could give us a few examples of the services that EBCAP provides that support children and families, and also explain what the East Providence Health Equity Zone is. I think that many audiences will be, members of our audience will be interested in the Health Equity Zone. And so, Alyssa, why is EBCAP partnering with the school district on First 10, and how can the relationships with the Health Equity Zone members be helpful?
Thanks, David, and thanks so much for allowing me to come on and have the opportunity to speak about our work. Health Equity Zones are community-driven resident-led initiatives, which just means that the community is saying, these are our priorities. These are our barriers to health access, our barriers to health equity. It's not myself or someone else going out and guessing and saying, okay, I think you need these three things. These three things should be your priority. The community is saying it, and we're looking at funding and programming based on that and building relationships and trust because we're listening to community members. So one of the things we did hear from residents is the struggle with accessing resources, especially for families with young kids and expectant parents. So there was this natural tie-in with Karen's program and with the First 10 initiative, where we said, okay, we have some funding, we have a family navigator, let's place her in the elementary school, and let's look at this a little bit differently. Let's have her be a resource to parents and guardians versus for kids. So they're able to come in, and because we have EBCAP as our backbone agency, they have that direct connection to WIC, to SNAP, to the food pantry, to LIHEAP, to all of these social services, as well as some of the more peer support services like home visiting programs. They can be told about Head Start and early Head Start for their younger children. And what it's allowed us to do is build this connection with residents, but then also to increase their comfort level with accessing these resources. They know, okay, this is the family navigator. I trust this person. I see them regularly. All of a sudden, it's not so intimidating to go and apply for SNAP or apply for WIC because you have an ally right next to you. And because of this, I'm glad that Karen mentioned actually the aero gardens and the community garden at the school. We were able to look at it and say, what are the other needs we're hearing from the community and how can we braid all of that together? So when we're looking at nutrition, we're looking at food access, it's a natural starting point to say, let's work in the schools, let's continue to build this relationship. And that's been really great. And the flip side of that is because we're a collaborative, we're working off of collective impact. We have a really active steering committee, which is very similar to a board for a nonprofit. And they represent all of those areas you showed on your PowerPoint earlier. There's that circle, right? We have religious organizations, we have nonprofits, we have schools. And because we have that representation, we can then go back to them and say, this is what we're doing. Can you share it out? So, we were fortunate to have you present earlier this month to our steering committee. And there's that level of interest. Okay, we have a hospital that we're working with. How can we use that information and share it out with parents that are there? We have the Chamber of Commerce represented. How can we work with business owners? and really help the schools to make this community-wide effort.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. Again, I want to underscore for our audience this the idea that Alyssa mentioned when we talk about building the family navigator, building trust with the families, and therefore they're more comfortable taking advantage of the services that EdCap and its collaborators have in East Providence. I think that's really, really important. That idea of having an ally, and I also will just mention that the strong partnership that Alyssa and Karen have made, and more generally that EbCap and the school district have made, is really those two organizations are really serving as anchor institutions, kind of co-anchor institutions for the community. And that's a model that we see in many of our first 10 partnerships. And others we have, there's sometimes where we have kind of a group of anchor organizations, but often when we have two like that, it can be very, very powerful. So thank you for those comments, Alyssa. So now for the second round of questions, we'll delve into the how of implementing First 10 and some of the strategies our panelists are carrying out. So back to Secretary Cooper. Secretary Cooper, the Department of Early Childhood Ed is currently supporting 15 counties as they mount grade level reading campaigns. And last week, several leaders of these county efforts came together to learn more about new pilot opportunities for communities, either to create transition to kindergarten plans or to implement the full First 10 model. Could you describe, please, for our audience, the campaign for grade level reading in Alabama, and why you and your colleagues think that participating counties are good candidates for First 10 and transition to kindergarten expansion?
Yes, thank you, David. In July of 2020, Governor Ivey issued her call to action to the children's policy councils to improve literacy in their counties. Counties are addressing 3 of the 5 pillars in the campaign for grade level reading call to action, which includes family engagement, birth to age 8 systems, health and well-being, and supporting struggling readers, which includes our English language learners and special education students. Learning outside of the classroom is also one of those pillars. Our goal is actually to have all 67 of our counties become campaign for grade level reading counties. Improving literacy, we know, requires collaborative efforts among an entire community. The department has worked with other agencies, such as our Reach Out and Read partnership, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Alabama Department of Public Health, Mental Health, as well as Medicaid agency. And we've also collaborated with the River Region, which is 5 counties with United Way, to actually expand Dolly Parton Imagination Library program to 10,000 children ages birth through 5. So you ask, why are we good candidates, or why are these good candidates for First 10 and transition communities? And the reason is they've already made a commitment through their campaign for grade level reading, through their Children's Policy Council, which makes up a myriad of individuals coming together to really support countywide efforts. They're trying to adopt broader community-based initiatives that address literacy challenges within specified targeted areas. So this was a great place to start. They also completed their own needs assessment and identified their campaign for grade level reading focus areas of one of those 5 areas I've indicated. They've already started the process of engaging community-wide stakeholders and developing partnerships that would support comprehensive services. So this was before they even knew about First 10. And so the transition to kindergarten framework focuses heavily on pre-K students and their transition into kindergarten. Engaging in this work as a First 10 cohort provides these counties and participating stakeholders with an additional focus on transition connections and processes. It incorporates those 4 types of connections that we know are critical for success, long-term success for our children: the school to child, the school to family, program school, and school community, that we know research indicates is fundamental to the later success of children in this school environment and in general. So becoming a First 10 community actually helped to take the work to another level. They already had the Transition to Kindergarten Toolkit, and now they can actually allow participants to continue to develop this whole comprehensive framework by extending the planning process, giving them some supports that were not there prior to them becoming First 10, supporting their strategic direction. And I think most importantly, having that local context that is critical. We cannot come in from the state level and push into a community a one-size-fits-all approach. So you're going to see, and you've probably seen through some of the pictures and examples that David provided, that this is very much homegrown and local in terms of what they need, but it's pulling all of those resources together in a way that allows them to support literacy initiatives through formal evaluations, that allows them to take everything that First 10 provides and the supports that are there to create a framework for comprehensively addressing birth through age 8 with a local context.
Thank you, Secretary Cooper. Really exciting, this idea that all the support that you provided to these counties in making them, grade level reading campaign counties really then provides fertile terrain to deepen this work and extend this work through First 10 and the transition to kindergarten work. So really, really exciting. Dr. Berry, in York City, as we've discussed, community-wide teams are working on improving the transition to kindergarten. They're working on providing school-connected play and learn groups throughout the city. They're working on early literacy. They're now working on a basics parenting campaign. And at the same time, the district is supporting, as you mentioned earlier, 3 First 10 community schools. And for the audience, again, these are community schools that develop partnerships with health and social service agencies and then extend these supports to families with young children in the neighborhood, even before the children enter school. So big picture, Dr. Berry, why are both district level and school level partnerships important? And what do you see as the benefits of this two-pronged approach?
So the importance is being able to build relationships as early as possible. If we have the end per se, and we are able to utilize or to collaborate with our community partners who are already seeing these students for health and wellness, or these students are coming to the library with their parents to read books, or they're using our healthcare center, we already have an established door to begin building relationships. We provide books for kids, we do different things to let them know, hey, the school is a safe haven. We want you to come. Even before you're enrolled, we want you to see what it's like. If you're a parent, we want you to come in, and on specific days, we'll bring in our 3-year-olds or our 2-year-olds for story time in pre-K. We want to make sure that school is viewed within the community as a safe haven and as a great place. Because if parents are trusting of the schools, the kids will be trusting of the schools. And we feel like it is very important to establish those relationships early to see that. Furthermore, this two-prong approach idea is that we know that, we're going to see these kids eventually. Let's say we get them as 4-year-olds. It's not a bad thing because we still do get some kids at 4 and we don't have relationships with them before that for whatever reason. But I tell you, there is definitely a difference in the data when you take a look at the kids that we've been working with prior to, and when you take a look at the organizations that are around us that have partnered with us and are speaking the same language as us and are utilizing the same resources and are having the same types of play and learn activities, it's a smoother transition. The two-prong approach makes the transition and the ready for school, it makes it very smooth. Having the basics campaign is icing on the cake because it allows us to give parents little pieces of information, little nuggets. I don't know about you all, but I'm a parent of a 12 and 13-year-old, and I could benefit from a text here and there to tell me what the best practices are for raising teenagers. So I think parents have grown to appreciate that, because there is no handbook on how to be a good parent, right? There may be lots of textbooks out there, but every situation is different. So the more touch points that we can have, I feel like the stronger our relationships can be. And with the two-pronged approach, those are two guaranteed touch points. And any other touch points that we get, they just magnify the relationship. What warms my heart is when I'm out in the grocery store and a parent comes up to me and say, "Hey, you're Dr. Berry, you're the superintendent of the school district." I say, "Yes, what school do your kids go to?" "Oh, my kids don't go to school there yet, but I came to the Play and Learn and you were there. And I just want to say I appreciate it." And so that type of stuff warms my heart, because for me, that's winning. That means that not only did we make a good impression as a school community, but they're remembering and they feel comfortable enough to come up and say hello. So for me, I want all my schools in as soon as possible. If I had money, they'd all be in now. But I really appreciate the relationships that come out of that partnership.
Thank you, Dr. Berry. I think you're right. That is winning. That is a great example of winning. And this idea that if parents are trusting, then the children will see school as trusting as well. I think really, really important. And also this idea of the more touch points we can have, the better. So thank you, Dr. Berry. Turning to Alyssa. Alyssa, you spoke a little bit before about the family navigator that EBCAP is placing at East Providence, Elementary School. From your perspective as a local social service agency, what has worked about this collaboration?
Yeah, so I'm really glad I get to follow up from what Dr. Berry was just saying, and especially that piece about if the parents trust the school, the kids will trust the school. And I think Dr. Cooper said something too about it being homegrown and allowing the ownership by the community. So having our family navigator there, just as an example, we've done Play and Learns too. We did one in the spring with the school, and the feedback that came to me afterwards was that parents would walk in and they're in a space that's a little unfamiliar. Their kids haven't gone to elementary school yet, and they'd look around and see who else is in the room. And they would see the family navigator, and you could see the tension go down. And that it was, okay, here's someone here who I know, someone here who I trust. And to build on that, we did a second Play and Learn group. The first one, we had a few families come. It was a good attendance rate, but nothing over the top. The second one, we had to close registration. We had more families than we could realistically provide a service to. And I think at one point we had 15 families on a waiting list, which for a Play and Learn group in the middle of the week is really something to hear. And it's because she was able to build that trust and to give that ownership to parents, that parents were coming to her and saying, we want more peer support. We want more of the education. We're not quite sure where to get it. Can you provide it? So there was that buy-in from the community level. And that makes it that much easier for someone to then follow up, as I was saying earlier, and say, can you connect me to WIC now? Can you connect me to SNAP? Can you connect me to whatever it is? And then also when we're looking at our other initiatives around nutrition and healthy eating and access to food, that the parents know us now, so they know where we're coming from. We're not coming from that place of, we want to teach you how to do this for your child. We're saying, okay, we want to help you. We want to partner with you. What can we do to provide that support? And I think that's been that biggest piece, that biggest strength. And of course, just having that connection with the school department for them to share, here are some of the things that we're hearing overall. Here are the larger trends, the larger themes in the city for needs, and us being able to then say, okay, how are we going to address that?
Thank you, Alyssa. I'm really glad you mentioned this idea that the First 10 partnership in East Providence was very deliberate in having the family navigator be at the play and learns, be at the school on the day when the play and learns take place. So not only is the family navigator providing those connections for families of school-age children, but also for providing it for the families of younger children who are attending the play and learns. And I really like this idea about how the fact that they already had some of these relationships ease their way into the play and learns. And you're right. Sometimes in play and learns, it takes a little while for the word to get out. And we do this good work then, and our attendance and participation starts to grow through word of mouth. So those are great things to highlight. So now turning to Karen. Karen, on the flip side, what do you think from the school district perspective is the value of the EBCAP's Family Navigator? And also, it'd be great if you could tell us a little bit more about the collaboration between EBCAP and the library and the school around the play and learns.
So I think the Family Navigator allows the schools to be the hub. I mean, that's like pretty much the crust, I think, of what happens, because like I said, social workers and psychologists are used in such different ways in schools. They don't always have that time to reach out to community services directly. They often count on the family member to kind of do that themselves. The navigator has provided, as Alyssa said, a person to become familiar with, to become trusting of, and then to work with, to say, these are really my needs. This is really what I believe my family needs, and have a person to be able to get them to that right connection. So I think that for the schools, and when I think of like our whole idea behind this, was key. That was, I think, probably one of the biggest reasons to have a community school, was to insert that person inside of it and not be working separately. So that, that being said, I mean, it's an exceptional way of providing these services. From the standpoint of like the play and learns, like you said, like our Hennessy School is our original site of our play and learns. It's one of our more diverse cities, and we deal with a lot of some needs for free and reduced lunches in that area, and we really tried to capture a place that would really benefit most from the outside resources that they may not or may have knowledge of, but not be getting any services from. So we started there. We got children from the neighborhood to come. We didn't fill all the seats, so we asked other neighboring schools to provide us with some students to come. The families seemed to enjoy the interaction. They enjoyed the topics. I think they really did enjoy like the basics, the parental guidance that they were receiving, no matter where they stood in education. And I feel like it was a nice support group for each other. We actually, scary enough to say, implemented this kind of at the end of the COVID era, when it was scary to kind of get back into schools and to be back together, and families were that impressed by it that they came, so we saw some real support of it in that way, and we knew that there was clearly a need. At the end, we did surveys, and the group definitely talked about how important it was and how much they got from it, and really encouraged us to continue to do that work. For our school, the community school that we started, we were really trying to, and still are, trying to access that 0 to 5 population to get beyond our 4-year-olds. We are a city that hosts several state pre-Ks, but we realize that there's a whole nother level beyond that our city needs to help support. And so we look to use these play and learns as opportunities to identify where these kids all live, and how we can get them involved in their neighborhood school even prior to their start at 4, which happens to be with us, or kindergarten, as we say, for those kids that don't get into the pre-K setting.
That's great, Karen. As Karen and Alyssa talk about their collaboration, what has been really exciting for me to see is the way that EBCAP and the school district have collaborated on the curriculum of the play and learns. At first, EBCAP was doing parents as teachers play and learns. That's a parents as teachers as a home visiting model. They also do play and learn type activities. And then through this collaboration, we've been able to really integrate the Parents as Teachers and the Basics Parenting Campaign. And then in the subsequent play and learn, there's a different curriculum that EBCAP uses called Growing Great Kids. And we were able to integrate that. Really, the First 10 partnership was able to integrate that with the basics. And then the fact that we have these two anchor institutions working together, that I think that really helped with the recruitment of family. When you bring the resources of the district to bear and the resources of EBCAP and our other First 10 partners, we really were successful in getting the word out to families. So great, thank you, Karen. So this final question I'll ask of everyone, and this is: what lessons learned are emerging from the work thus far, and what are your hopes for this work? And this time we'll begin with Alyssa.
Thanks, David. So the biggest lesson learned, and I think we all knew this at some level, is we just need to keep listening to the families, to the parents. We need to keep having that collaborative, trusting relationship. I've been keeping an eye on the chat, and that's the theme that's popping up there as well, right? That all of these initiatives are based off of building trust, and letting residents and families know that we're going to go about this at your pace. We're going to come to you, meet you at wherever you are, whatever your scheduling or other obligations allow. That's what we're going to do. So my hope is for us to, one, just continue to keep doing that, and two, to continue creating that bridge for residents. We know the resources are there. We know the residents want those resources, to find ways to continue connecting them and to hit that point where it's just automatic, right? Someone says, oh, I need this service, whether they have a kid in school or not, whether they're still in school or not. Instead of wondering, where do I go? Or I'm going to Google it and hope I come up with the right answer. They know these are the trusted groups, and I can always start with the school and they're going to tell me where to go. I can always start with EBCAP and they're going to tell me where to go, and create those automatic touch points for residents.
Thank you, Alyssa. We'll turn to Karen. Great thoughts there, Alyssa.
Oh. Yeah, excellent thoughts, Alyssa. I think it's great to follow you, because we are, quite a collaboration together. I think that we believe a lot of the same things, and I feel like through this whole panel discussion, everybody that is involved is feeling the same way. I think First 10 has been such a gift to us, and we have been able to reach out to places I didn't even know existed, sometimes in my own community, and gather information that took me forever to realize was really there. So I feel like Alyssa said, it's a matter of continuing our work. I feel like it's such important work. Sometimes we just don't either have the time or the funding or whatever it is, and we kind of give up on our goals or our dreams. And this is truly a dream that really, I think, because families are so grateful at the end of anything we do with them, we know that the work is meeting the need and getting to people who really need it to be gotten to. And I feel like they, will keep us in check for sure.
Thank you, Karen. That's great. I'll turn to Dr. Berry. Lessons learned and hopes moving forward for this work.
So I have three major lessons that I've learned in this work. The first one is, foundational work is paramount. Mm-hmm. Catching students early and being able to build a foundation as early as possible impacts the end game majorly. There's lots of research out there to support that. I think the second lesson learned is to understand the power in collaboration versus competing. A lot of times you have entities around you, and somehow it becomes a competition instead of a collaboration. But the power in the collaboration has come to life very rapidly as we've embarked upon this work. And I think that's a two-way street between the district and the partners that we are serving shoulder to shoulder with. And finally, I think the big lesson is that there's power in being an early bird. You know, when you look at innovative initiatives where you're looking at kids from birth, you're going to have much more bang for your buck in the end than waiting until kids come to school. And then as for hopes for the future, you know, it's my hope to really be able to afford for all of my schools to be first 10 schools and to be a part of the initiative and to understand the power in working as a community, the power of, you know, collaborating and working shoulder to shoulder with places like barbershops. We have a really, really strong relationship with our faith-based community. We have a faith-based leaders meeting monthly, and the power that has come out of that meeting and the energy around First 10 and community collaboration is mind-blowing. So I'm just thankful to be able to be a vessel to be able to help this work happen.
Dr. Berry, I'm really glad you mentioned this idea about competition, because that is a question that I get a lot is, you know, we do sometimes have competing agencies, competing interests, and then but we're able then, it's really important to then develop these collaborative relationships which can help with some of that competition. And I'm also glad you mentioned the faith-based organizations. We presented the basics to faith-based organizations in many communities. I always emphasize we presented the basics to red churches, blue churches, purple churches, and they all are able to embrace the basics. And so now we'll turn Secretary Cooper, lessons learned and hopes for the future.
Thank you, David. And it's nice to be last because I got to hear all of those wonderful comments, and I ditto basically all of those with regard to the lessons that have been learned. But this work has been an opportunity for us to just see how we can transform entire communities one at a time around the importance of investing early. And Dr. Berry's quote really resonates with me about never underestimate the power of being the early bird, because if we pour into children in those very earliest stages possible, we're not going to spend the next 12 years remediating. The First 10 framework is being used in our state to strengthen birth to age 8 efforts while filling gaps that make it challenging to reach entire communities. First 10, one lesson learned is that it's been a way to provide a statewide strategy for supporting local communities. I also agree with the power of collaboration, and we should never underestimate that, because what we've been able to do with our partner agencies, with other stakeholders, has really allowed us to move the effort forward so much faster than we could have had we tried to do it solo. I've been doing this work for a very long time and believe that the First 10 approach absolutely helps us to connect the dots that aren't always possible, and it welcomes parents to the table as their child's first teacher. We all recognize that getting the right people on the bus is critical, but strategically allowing the work to move forward and have everyone moving in the right direction allows us to make the type of transformational change possible that First 10 has provided for our state. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Cooper. And I want to thank all of our panelists for their comments, their reflections. As I said at the beginning, these are stellar leaders who are doing really, really exciting work. And I think we've all heard that in their reflections and comments today. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Jenny Atkinson, who is going to take questions from the chat. We're eager to respond to questions that you have. So, well, we'd love to be in dialogue with you.
Great, thank you so much, David. And we do have quite a few questions. We'll see if we can get to all of them. If you have a question you haven't put in the Q&A box, feel free to still do that. We may have time. So the first one, two related questions. One is is there an implementation guide for first 10? And similarly, is there a set curriculum for the play and learn groups?
Great question. In terms of an implementation guide, First 10 is really a guided process. So you're welcome to visit first10.org when you'll see various resources that we've shared, but not an implementation guide. First 10 is really something that it's really a process that we carry out with our communities. As Dr. Cooper said, it's really one by one, transforming community one by one at a time. And the play and learns, really, we've developed that very organically. It was actually a couple of teachers in York who developed some of our first lesson plans together. It was a cross-agency affair. A pre-K teacher and a Head Start coordinator with input from others developed our first play and learns. They did a great job. We've shared those with other communities. Other communities come up with great ideas. They tweak, they adapt them in various ways. I mentioned the example in East Providence. They combined those lessons with the parents as teachers approach. So we do not have a set curriculum. I will, however, provide one resource. We use as a foundational kind of guide for all of our play and learns, a guidance document created called Kaleidoscope, which is a play and learn group model developed in Seattle. I learned about it through my research on Oregon. And while I will find that link and put it in the chat. So Kaleidoscope, it really sets forth the principles that all First 10 partnerships use for their play and learns.
Great, thank you, David. We have a question here for Dr. Barry. Can you elaborate on how you built relationships between district and community early learning providers? So just a little bit more about how that relationship was started and built.
So we do have several different, natural ways that some of those relationships were able to take place. But I think one of the big game changers was the invitations to our professional developments. I think inviting them to share and learn with us, with no strings attached. You don't have to pay to come. We just want you to be a part of our learning community, and let's help kids together. I think, I believe that was paramount in the beginning of building those relationships. And then it became, when they had affairs or when they had professional development, they were inviting our teachers or inviting us to have so many seats at the table. I think those were the beginning stages. I also think something that was instrumental is when we did some of the work with the play and learns and inviting them to participate in those as well. We were sending out flyers. It wasn't just for our existing families. We were trying to get as many families as we possibly could. So sending that out, and I think this inclusive environment that we provided was kind of a stage setter and a model. And then I think that the organizations began to reciprocate. And I also think that when we utilized our clinic and our barbershops and all of the community organizations around us, we kind of had this rally around situation where everybody wanted to help everyone. And that's what we want, right? We want this to be a parallel partnership as well as a perpendicular partnership. And we want to eventually affect systemic change in the entire community, not just in the schools.
Great, thank you so much. Actually, before you go off camera, it looks like there's one more question for you. Okay. Dr. Barry mentioned being able to afford including this resource in all schools. What is the investment dollars so far in your state, would you say?
It depends. It depends on what exactly you want. And the whole kit and caboodle can run you in the $30,000 range per school, depending on what you get, though. You know, it's kind of customized. It's not a one price fits all, and I don't want to speak on behalf of what the charge is for organizations. But what I will say is, to get the level of assistance, resources, coaching that I feel are instrumental in making the program successful, the price tag is hefty, but certainly well worth it. I have no complaints. And, you know, if the price was higher, I'm not encouraging it to be higher, but if the price was higher, I wouldn't hesitate, because I know the quality and quantity, and I know what return on investment I'm getting.
And I would just add there, Jenny, if I could, we brought York and East Providence on in particular as communities that were really invested in doing this work at a high level, because we thought that learning would be interesting to the audience. We, as I mentioned before, we often start with a district-wide partnership, and we're able to do lots of great work that way. And then in a few other instances, we'll start with just this community school hub model. So in the case of York, we're really doing both. I think we have great need. We're doing a lot of good work there, but it's not necessary to take that two-pronged approach.
Great, thank you. All right, you may have seen the poll just come up on your screen. We're going to continue the Q&A as you answer those questions. We have a question here. Any strategies for dealing with a difficult school district that may not be a good partner, or on the flip side, you know, just engaging partners that in the past maybe have been uneven, or where there's a history of difficulty?
I can start that, and then if any of the panelists would like to weigh in, we certainly have had communities where there's been a difficult history. And you know, some of the ways that we're able to, I would say there's kind of 2 or 3 strategies that have helped in those communities. One, and this was a community in Rhode Island, kind of a more or less, you know, a community not so far from East Providence, our panelists today. Woonsocket, Rhode Island, really came up with an idea of beginning their partnership afresh by having it at a local restaurant and actually getting a room, decorating the room, and meeting on neutral terrain. So I think in some of those instances, if there's a little bit of challenging history in the past, beginning on neutral terrain, starting afresh, serving a meal, putting some effort into the event can be a way to kick things off. I'll also mention a kind of a second idea is start with the willing and grow from there. And so I think we've had seen a lot of partnerships that start with you know, one early childhood provider or Head Start and one other early childhood provider and the district, and then we expand from there. And those early childhood or Head Start programs have credibility with the rest of the early childhood community, and they can be key anchor institutions to bring the others in. And the third thing I would say is kind of consistent with that second idea is as we do the work, we show the benefit of the work. And so then we have something to show for it. So we'll create our transition to kindergarten form for every teacher of 4-year-olds to use and share with kindergarten teachers. And we'll have a clarified process for how that's actually going to get in the hands of kindergarten teachers. And that will impress those community-based programs that maybe were a little bit hesitant. And they're like, we want to use that form. Thank you. You know, we will have professional learning opportunities and invite those teachers, and they'll see the value of that collaboration. Their teachers will be paid the same as our kindergarten teachers. They see that respect. We create a respectful tone in those events, and then that helps to bring on more. So those are some of the ways that we'll do that. Looks like Secretary Cooper wants to add to there.
And I definitely agree with what you've shared, David, about starting with the willing. I also think that along with that, also starting with strategies that communities might already be implementing and they can go deeper with. For instance, in our state, everyone is required to have a transition plan. So our kindergarten transition toolkit was a way to do an all-state strategy around how do we go deeper with what you're already doing. So naturally, all 67 counties are not going to look exactly the same, but we started in a common place. And then we introduced the idea of first 10 communities, and we had a couple communities that volunteered and could see how it could meet an immediate need. For instance, Russellville was kind of struggling with ways that they could continue to engage their dual language learners. So that was kind of the inroads for them to go deeper with that particular strategy. So I think if you can identify places that already have either something going on or that they're already doing and they can go deeper, that's an opportunity for them to identify ways to actually become first 10. Also building on strategies and resources that are already available. For instance, our first class pre-K program is in all 67 counties. So we're already doing things around first 10 type strategies, as well as transitions for all of those pre-K classrooms for kids to go into kindergarten. So we just identify ways we can use existing resources. All of our coaches know about the first 10 transition kindergarten plan and toolkit, so they're able to go deeper within the work that they are providing each of those classroom teachers around transitions as well. So I think building upon things that already exist is an outstanding way to really enter that conversation about, hey, what about also looking at being a first 10 community?
Thank you so much. We have a few questions that we didn't get to, so I apologize for that. So many great questions about this first 10 approach and the work that you all are doing. But we are at 2 o'clock, so I want to thank all of you for joining us for this webinar, and in particular to thank David, Karen, Alyssa, Dr. Barry, and Dr. Cooper for such a inspiring and really informative session about the work that you're doing in this space. So thank you, and thank you as well to our translators, Angela and Judy, for providing that for us. We really appreciate that. And as just a reminder, these webinars are upcoming and starting with today at 3. And so if you can join us for one of those, we would love to see you later on today or on an upcoming Tuesday. Have a great afternoon, everyone, and see you later.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much.